For everyone out there who says that modern day MotoGP is boring and predictable, what do you have to say about what happened in Indonesia? Just curious. Welcome back to another edition of Monday Morning MotoGP, and this week we are talking about the Indonesian Grand Prix. But before we dive into everything that happened in a very chaotic weekend in MotoGP, please like, follow, share, subscribe, mash all the buttons so you get all the MotoGP content you can possibly imagine. And fun fact, we normally respond to every single comment. So come talk some MotoGP with us. Well, we have a lot to talk about. I mean, we had crazy qualifying, crazy practice sessions, an amazing sprint, and a bizarre, let's just call it that, bizarre Grand Prix that had some big, massive ramifications for the rest of the season and beyond. We're going to talk about the Bez haters and the saboteurs out there who think he ran into Marc Marquez on purpose. We're going to talk about a Pecco conspiracy. Yeah, more Pecco. I know he's kind of irrelevant these days in MotoGP, but we thought his problems were solved, and it doesn't seem quite that simple. We're also going to talk about how MotoGP can never really be predictable. Okay, and there's nothing ever guaranteed from week to week or session to session in MotoGP, and this last weekend proves it. So we've got a lot to go on. So let's just, first of all, let's jump into one of my favorite topics of conversation, and that is the flyaway races. The flyaways are always my favorite, and why that is these are tracks that the riders don't get to ride on very often. There's no one that's really an expert at these tracks. There's not a home race for most of these guys. These tracks are very, for lack of a better word, foreign to the entire MotoGP paddock. Then you throw in baking hot, humid conditions in Indonesia, the wind, a possibility of rain, you have jet lag. There's so many things for these riders to deal with. You never know what you're going to get in a race weekend. So it's not just like a Spanish round where, well, we know Marc's going to go fast, Alex is going to go fast. You know, an Italian round, we know Pecco's going to go fast, and Nea Bastianini's going to go fast. You know, you get into the Silverstone Grand Prix and you know that there's a few riders that always go well there. These races, like Japan, massively unpredictable. No one saw Pecco going to the front of that race and then disappearing. Nobody had that on their bingo card. And this weekend in Indonesia proves again, these flyaway races are pound for pound the best of the season. And it's a little unfortunate that they happen so late. A lot of times, especially this year, after the championship and the title has already been decided. Because how different would the rest of the year look if the championship hadn't been decided last weekend in Japan? Now, Marc probably still wins. He had a very healthy buffer to Alex Marquez, even if he kind of even missed most of the rest of the season, but it sure would have thrown a wrinkle in the rest of the MotoGP season if Marc would have gone down with an injury in Japan before he wrapped this up. And it happened in Indonesia. Now, we saw the sprint, and the sprint, I think, the commentators made a good point. It probably would have been a very boring sprint if Marco Bezzecchi would have gotten the start we had kind of all thought he would. The fact that he did get a bad start, had to fight his way through to compete back at the front and pass Fermin Aldeguer in that last lap, made it a very good sprint race. It's a lot like Maverick Vinales, was it last year in Coda, where he was at the front of the grid, gets a bad start, ends up midway in the pack, and then had to battle all the way back through to the win. The race was great because he was out of position on the first lap, and that's when we get these amazing races. But then on the Grand Prix Sunday, I mean, we had Brad Binder coming through way back in the grid. We had Luca Marini riding in the front. We had Raul Fernandez riding at the front. A lot of things that don't normally happen in a MotoGP weekend we got to see. I mean, when other weekend did we see Fermin Aldeguer win a race by 9 seconds? I know it's his first win, I'm aware. But by 9 seconds, that sort of domination, like this is the kind of things that can happen in a flyaway weekend when every variable is put under the massive amount of pressure it can be possibly put under, and mistakes are made. People make bad moves, bad starts, bad judgments. These aren't tracks that they know like the back of their hand, or they can smell the rain coming, like in Misano or Mugello, like the Italian riders say. Wow, you can smell the rain coming. We know if it's coming for real or if it's not really coming. They have so much experience, so much track time. And these races, even the ones that, you have Phillip Island, it's been on the calendar for forever. Everyone's ridden there. except the rookies. The rookies have never ridden there on a MotoGP bike, except for, maybe someone who's new to their new manufacturer. Well, I've never ridden a Ducati at this particular track. It makes the game change ever so slightly. And the fact that they don't do a lot of testing in places like Indonesia or Phillip Island makes that even more exciting. And I think we're going to see more action this next round in Phillip Island. And I love the flyaways. I wish we could sprinkle them in. We did a little bit better of job this year with starting in Thailand and then coming to the US, South America. We do that kind of thing where we kind of split the flyaway so they're not just all back to back on the end of the season, which is great. But I think even more, the more that they could kind of split these up. And also, like I said before, we don't have to have legacy tracks in MotoGP. We don't have to have tracks we go to every single year just because we do. There's going to be tracks we go to every single year just because we do it. And usually those are the real popular ones. I mean, Le Mans is not coming off of the calendar anytime soon. But pull a Spanish race, pull an Italian race every other year, make it a little bit different, switch it up, go to places these riders aren't familiar with, and make them cope with the pressure that comes to learning a new track from day one, dealing with the heat or the cold or whatever the track is going to throw at you. Some of these tracks aren't used very often, so they're very green when they arrive. Just to me, pound for pound, the best entertainment in MotoGP are the flyaway races. But let's get to the drama of the MotoGP race, because I saw it online already. I saw the memes. Osama Bez Laden. Oh, Bez took out Mark for revenge for him winning the championship and tying Valentino. All that sort of nonsense. Now forget the fact that the first thing Bezzecchi did when he got up off the gravel, not knowing if he was okay injury-wise yet, is he ran straight over to Mark and apologized. And as reports have showed, he went again to Mark and apologized yet again for the move. He was trying to be ultra-aggressive. He was pressing. He wanted to make that move. No one wanted to wipe out in that corner. That corner is horrendously fast place to crash. No one was trying to run into each other, take someone out. All of you out there who are saying things like that are the same ones who clutched their pearls when Rossi was smiling. Oh, he smirked when Mark crashed out of the lead of the sprint. Oh, the Italian fans, these horrible Italian fans, applauding when Marc Marquez crashes. You're the same people out here perpetuating nonsense about riders intentionally wrecking other riders for a feud that, I'm just going to be honest with you, Marco Bezzecchi, Pecco Bagnaia, Luca Marini, they don't care about the Marquez-Rossi feud. Watch how they interact with Marquez. Look how Bezzecchi and Marquez behave. Pecco and Marquez, how they behave together. There is no whiff of that Rossi rivalry. They're not carrying the flag for daddy. He can fight his own fights. He's the big number 46. He's still the big man in MotoGP, even after he's retired. They don't need to fight his battles, and they don't feel like they have to. And I think Rossi has basically told them, listen, guys, you ride your own ride. You race your own race. How you deal with Marquez, how I feel about him, those things aren't related. So for those of you who think that Bezzecchi was crashing into Marquez on purpose, get a life. It's just not what happened. Now, but the thing I do want to talk about, though, is how riders handle this type of pressure. Because we see riders make a bad start, make a mistake, or run wide in a turn, or almost lose the front, and then have to gather themselves up. And then what they do then, after that mistake is made, after that bad start is made, what they do then says a lot about how they're riding. And we see some riders become very impatient when they make a mistake. We've seen this from Pedro Acosta. We've seen how aggressive he can be. If he gets passed, he wants to pass back right away. We see that with Marc Marquez. If he makes a mistake, he's kind of what they call riding with the red mist underneath the helmet and really just trying to push his way back to the front. And then we see riders who are a little more calm and a little more gathered. And I think we can take two VR46 riders this weekend and look at how they kind of managed their aggression and managed something that kind of didn't go their way, and then how it ended up as a result. Now, I'm not saying aggression is always bad. We saw Pedro Acosta be very aggressive in this race, fighting for every inch on the racetrack, and it working out, him finishing second in the Grand Prix. He fought off that second really, really hard. And so the aggression where he was using it, where he's riding right alongside those other riders, potentially putting himself in a bad position for the next corner, maybe bad racecraft, it is just a fine line between being aggressive, over-aggressive, or not aggressive enough. So it's all a judgment call, and we're talking about millimeters and microseconds yet again. We're not talking about big fat gaps of, well, he should have completely known better. So let's take two riders and talk about their contrasting fortunes this last weekend. We had Marco Bezzecchi make that horrible mistake at the start of the race, did the same thing in the sprint. In the sprint, we watched him gather himself and then just kind of pick the riders off one by one. Even in the shortened format, he knew he had the speed to get back up there and at least contend for the podium, and then as he got through, realizing, no, I can still win the race. Now on Sunday, he looked a little bit rushed. He looked like he was kind of struggling with his patience to try to get through on Marc Marquez, and he wanted to make that move as fast as humanly possible, and he's getting too close to Marc. I don't even think necessarily he was lining up for a pass there. I think he may thought there was some space initially, but it looks like he was just riding a little too close and couldn't really judge Marc's speed versus his own speed. Thought there was a gap. By the time he realized there wasn't, couldn't really back off, and they both go out over in the gravel. But I think it really comes down to him wanting to make up for that bad start by running a very, very aggressive race. And in this case, far too aggressive. It puts himself and Marc in the gravel. Risks Bezzecchi having a huge injury. It sounds like he escaped the injury, but still puts himself at risk. Whereas if he would have been just a little more patient, Marc did not have the pace this weekend. Marc did not have the pace to get to the front. Bezzecchi was going to find a spot and pass him. And with the race being twice as long, I think he still could have fought his way back to the podium, if not the win. Now, who knows with the pace that Aldeguer was running at the front, if Bezzecchi could have caught him the same way he did on Saturday, we will never know. But I want to talk about another rider who was fighting near the front and got pushed way, way back and then had to basically assess how to come through in the end, and that was Luca Marini. Now, Luca was fighting for the podium in this race. We were looking at a Honda podium yet again underneath Luca Marini, and he was riding fantastic. Gets in a little scuffle with Raul Fernandez, which is tricky because Luca is not used to fighting with Raul, and Raul is not used to fighting at the front. So there's some aggressive moves made. There were some inches that weren't given when they were kind of riding next to each other, and Luca was the one who kind of came out the worst of all of it. Ends up back in 8th or 9th place, and now he's riding mid-pack, the podium running away from him. So what does he do? Does he do kind of what Bezzecchi did and get hurried, get excited, get a little bit over-aggressive, and then make the situation even worse? No, Luca ran a very, very patient race. He sat there, he found his rhythm again, and then little by little started picking riders off and moving forward. I think he ends up back in 5th place. Not a podium, but he finished higher than Bezzecchi did. And it goes to show you a little bit that when bad things happen on the racetrack, yes, you can be ultra aggressive and fire right back up at the front, and sometimes that works. But sometimes being able to collect yourself, realizing you have the speed, like, listen, maybe the podium is no longer in grasp for me, but I can do a heck of a lot better in 8th. And if I take the right approach, if I fight forward the way I know I can. And Luca Marini absolutely did that on Sunday. We saw he had superior pace to most of the guys in front of him, with the exception of maybe Fermin Aldeguer. I think Marini could have very easily finished second in this Grand Prix and got the best of Acosta at the end, just how smooth he was riding and how much he really likes this track. But he chose to basically, let's play it the safe, analytical Luca Marini way and not get out over our skis. Let's control what we can control and take back the positions that are owed to us. And in the end, he did get the best. I believe he got the best of Raul Fernandez. Did he end up passing him in the end? Crap, now I can't remember. Either way, finishes a lot higher up in 8th. Disappointed to not be on the podium, but it's a lot better than ending up in the gravel trap. So I think a lot of times we look and say, hey, yeah, aggression is good, but sometimes not giving up that one spot, refusing to budge, riding right alongside of your rival and forcing them to ride around the outside. Someone at some point has to give, and sometimes you're on the wrong side, you're on the receiving end of that punishment, and you have to pay the consequences. And it happens all the time. We see it all the time in MotoGP, even with Marc Marquez versus Bezzecchi, with, hey, Bez, tries to tough it out with Marc, gets run wide, and now Marc has too much of an advantage coming out of the next corner, and you can never really get back within that striking distance of Marc. If you would have let him through early, you might have been able to get up to him in the next corner and attack him again, but it's just all shoulda, coulda, wouldas, right? It's a game of inches. It's a game of inches played at a very, very fast pace. So I'm not judging, but I'm just trying to show you like the difference in styles and the way that aggression sometimes pays off, sometimes can really bite you in the ass. Now, speaking of biting you in the ass, I would like to talk to everyone out there about the predictability of MotoGP. Oh, Marc Marquez is going to win every single race, and it's the Ducati Cup. They're going to finish 1 through 6, and MotoGP is boring. Now, yes, this last race is a little atypical of MotoGP. It is a flyaway race. There's a lot of variables that aren't in the rider's control, but it just goes to show you how unpredictable MotoGP is and how you can never predict anything for certain. We don't know. Even me, who's sitting here making these predictions, who watches a ton of MotoGP, who reads everything he can get a hold of about MotoGP to bring it to you, I don't know anything for certain because they still have to throw their leg over the bike and ride. For example, this weekend, after what he did in the sprint race, the commentators said this: well, we know who's going to win this race. We know Marco Bezzecchi. No one has his pace. If he can come through from 8 yesterday in a sprint, he's going to charge to the front as long as he gets a decent start. Hell, even if he doesn't get a decent start, who's going to match him in this Grand Prix? We know what's going to happen. We just have to sort out what's going to happen behind him. And boy, was everyone wrong about that. Now think about this for a second. If Marc Marquez would have carried an injury 2, 3, 4 rounds ago like this, he's come in contact with other riders this season. He's gone bar to bar with Pecco Bagnaia a couple of times, and Pedro Acosta and Marco Bezzecchi. If things go a little bit differently earlier in the season and he breaks a collarbone then, the MotoGP championship isn't tied up in Japan or anywhere else. We look at Valentino Rossi's career, cruising towards the title. Injuries, setbacks, bad luck, all these things can happen. Rain is the great equalizer. Heat is the great equalizer. Injuries are a massive equalizer, and we never know what's going to happen. When you throw 22 bikes on the grid and ask them to go 200 plus miles an hour within inches of each other, it's like pool balls on a pool table. They're going to make contact, and you don't always know where they're going to end up. And so as much as people like to say modern MotoGP, oh, it's boring, and listen, I'm not saying it's perfect. There's a lot of things that I would love to see them fix. There are a lot of things with the aero. There are a lot of things with the closer racing, with the tire pressure. It's not perfect, but it is still one of the most unpredictable games on earth to try to get right. So many of us every week fill out our little fantasy brackets and say, okay, here's who's good. Even after watching practice, even after watching qualifying, here's what's going to happen in the race. Here's what's going to play out. Does sometimes it play out exactly as we think it does? Of course. But there are a lot of things that no one would have guessed this year. Let's just start with this week. Fermin Aldeguer winning by 9 seconds. No one had that on their bingo card. Marc Marquez crashing with Marco Bezzecchi. No one had that on their bingo card. After Saturday, Bezzecchi not winning the Sunday Grand Prix. Most of us didn't have that on our bingo card. Luca Marini, Joan Mir fighting for podiums this season. No one had that. Alex Rins running at the front of the Indonesian Grand Prix. No one knew anything about that. And then let's even get Brad Binder starting 15th, coming through to the front in this last Grand Prix. Johan Zarco winning a race in France, podium in Silverstone. Fabio Quartararo, mechanical in Silverstone, in the lead of that race. So many things have happened in this year alone that you can't possibly know, and no one knows anything until they throw the legs over the bike and they wave the checkered flag, and then we can look back and then we can know it in hindsight, and that's as good as we have. The rest of it, my guess, is as good as yours. Maybe a little bit better, maybe a little more educated. I do watch a lot of this stuff. But let's be honest, no one knows. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is the Pecco Bagnaia disappearing act he played in Indonesia this week. I mean, after Motegi, after going back to that 2024 bike last week in Japan and absolutely dominating, I think a lot of us expected more of the same in Indonesia. Now, he's not as good at this track. He has one here, he's podiumed here, but this isn't like a great track for him to come back at. We know that some of the Ducati riders have had a hard time with that harder carcass tire they have to use in these extremely hot conditions like Malaysia, Indonesia, and India. So we know that he doesn't love that tire and that harder casing tire. But I think a lot of us expected to him kind of at least pick up where he left off and be a lot closer to Marc than he was. He was nowhere all weekend long, and his reaction to the cameras in the garage post Q1, where he just kind of smiled and waved at the cameras just like this weird shit-eating grin he had to go, well, what else do you want me to do? felt really telling to what's going on in the Ducati garage these days. And a lot of people, there's so many rumors swirling about there's a rift between Ducati and Pecco, and they think that they think he's not riding well enough, that he thinks they've sabotaged his chances of a MotoGP title by not giving him what he wanted on the bike sooner in the year, and Japan was kind of the proof. There's a lot of stuff slinging back and forth, and I don't have any solid information that you probably don't have out there. All we do know, I mean, I don't like to say the word no. What we think, and what has been more or less confirmed, is that in the Misano test, Pecco Bagnaia ran Franco Morbidelli's 2024 Ducati to basically show Ducati bosses, listen, I'm still fast. If you give me what I want, then I can go quick. And they made some adjustments to Pecco's bike for the Japanese Grand Prix that were along the lines more closer to the 2024, the 2025, and he did gangbusters. I don't know if those changes at the Japan Grand Prix came with them to Indonesia, or if they basically said we're going back to the 2025 version and then working forward from there, and they're asking to do different things. So I'm just going to add fuel to the conspiracy fire, and I have no idea if this is true, but it's fun. So I think what the battle has been this year is what Pecco wants and what Ducati wants. Ducati does not want to go back and just run a 2024 at their factory squad. The factory squad is about developing a new bike and moving the program forward. I've said it in this program before, it's about the potential of the new bike. Maybe at the beginning of the season the bike isn't as strong as the older tried and true package, but the engineers and the team always are going to believe that the 2025 bike has the potential to take a step forward. That's factory development. That's the lot in life you have as a factory rider. The satellite guys, the independent teams, most of them get the older stuff. Yes, could it be slower? Yes, absolutely. But could it be tried and true, a great package to have underneath you like Alex and Firmin Aldeguer? Absolutely as well. So if the new bike hasn't made that step forward, the older guys are actually sitting at a better advantage. So I think this year Ducati is saying, listen, we don't want to just go back and give you something from last year. We think this new package is an improvement. You just have to make it work. And their proof that that is true is the guy sitting on the other side of the garage, Marc Marquez. He's making the bike work. Pecco, you have to do the same. And Pecco is saying, listen, Marc is an ungodly talent. Maybe the most talented rider to ever grace MotoGP or any motorsport ever. He can ride around problems, but I am telling you this new package has problems that I can't ride around. Now he's kind of put his hand up already and said, listen, I'm not Marc Marquez. I can't ride around these problems. I can't change my riding style this way to make this bike work. And so I think there's been a little bit of a push-pull between Pecco and Ducati going, give me what I want, give me what I want. What does Pecco want? What does Ducati want? And I think for that Misano test, they finally said to Pecco, fine, we will give you what you want, put your money where your mouth is. Now, unfortunately for Ducati, he absolutely did. He got what he wanted, and he showed the frick up. So now Ducati's put in an interesting situation. Do they continue to go with this 2024 version of the bike and basically admit that their 2025 bike, let's just say it, is not as good? We've seen this with Honda. We've seen this with other manufacturers. Their resistance for the factory team to say, yeah, our new bike isn't actually an improvement. They are going to die on this hill. They're going to say, well, no, the new bike, it has problems, but we have to work it out. Of course, it's an improvement, yada, yada, yada. Toe the company line. The bike is always getting better. It's the riders and the team that have to adjust to it. But let's be honest, the 2025 bike is not an improvement over the 2024. Firmin Aldeguer winning by 9 seconds in front of every other 2025 Ducati by a mile should be enough to prove it by now. If this was a better bike, we should have been able to see it underneath someone else other than Marc Marquez. So now what do you do, Ducati? You have Pecco saying, look, I'm right. And Ducati still has what they want, which is pushing forward. So when they go to Indonesia, is the bike closer to what Pecco wants or closer to what Ducati wants? Now, judging by the results and how Pecco went on, I would venture to guess that they tried to go back to a couple of 2025 things and say, okay, now that you're comfortable with that old package, let's work our way back in towards the 2025 because it has more potential. We're telling you, Pecco, it does. And he goes out there right away and has no confidence in any of it. Whether it's physical, whether it's mental, it doesn't really matter. Whether it is the bike, it doesn't really matter. He doesn't have confidence. I don't know if this is true. They could have rolled the exact bike from Japan out in Indonesia, and he still just had a clunker of a weekend. I don't know. But what it looks like, performance-wise, is in Japan, they gave Pecco what he wanted. And in Indonesia, they go, okay, now we go back to the program and we work our way back. And they just started back from square one. And Pecco is basically sitting there thinking he didn't talk to the media. He hasn't really explained himself. He refuses to talk about anything technical, whether or not that's a directive from Ducati or not. We don't know. But he's no longer saying anything about the bike other than just, I don't know what to do. And so whether or not Ducati has basically forced his hand and said, hey, you're going to ride this 2025. We gave you the week where you proved yourself that you could still ride. We still believe in you that you can still ride. Maybe internally they're even saying, hey, we also have a lot of soul searching and figuring out to do with this machine, but we have to ride the new bike. We can't just go back and go backwards down this way because we have a whole set of regulations changing. We have so much going on that we just can't backtrack, and these other manufacturers are catching up. So they want to exercise the new equipment. They want to put some miles on the new equipment and not just go back and let's be honest, win a few meaningless races at the end of this season. So my big conspiracy is I would love someone to dig in there into that motorcycle that they use in Indonesia and see if it was closer to what Ducati wants or is it closer to what Pecco wants. And is it some weird hybrid in the middle where no one is getting what they want? Kind of seemed that way, at least from the results in Indonesia. Either way, it seems like on the outside, Ducati is saying a lot of the right things. They're trying to protect their rider, but it does not seem like a happy time over there in the Ducati garage. And with Marc Marquez possibly missing some time, it means that Pecco will get a lot more of the attention. And again, he will be the only one prepping for what they're going to be doing next year. It's not going to be a big change. Obviously, there's a lot of technology freezes. They don't have concessions like Yamaha or Honda, so there's not a lot they can do. But they still want to develop this bike to move it forward. And Marc Marquez said as soon as he won the title, that's what he'd be looking towards. Well, that plan has been put on the back burner for a little bit. So the only rider that can look toward the future with Ducati is Pecco Bagnaia. And right now, he's not liking how the future looks on that particular motorcycle. So will they just give him back that 2024 and let him reel off a few wins just for old time's sake? We shall see. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of Monday Morning MotoGP. Please join me tomorrow where we go through my pre-race predictions on I Told You So Tuesday. Until then, see you later.